Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive. We're cracking open the Millionaire Next Door today.
Oh, yeah.
And really getting into
That's a good one.
how millionaires in America actually build their wealth.
Yeah.
Forget the fancy cars and all that.
Right.
This book goes way deeper into the habits and the mindsets, that actually make a difference.
Exactly.
So
It challenges a lot of assumptions
it really does.
about what it really means to be wealthy.
Okay, so one of the first things that jumped out at me was the book talks about these 7 common factors they found
Yeah.
among people who've built serious wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing. 80% of these millionaires are first-generation rich.
Wow.
They didn't inherit it.
Interesting.
They built it themselves, and one of those factors is that they live well below their means.
Makes sense.
Like the book even quotes them as saying, "We wear inexpensive suits and drive American-made cars." Are we talking about the same millionaires here?
I know, right? It's kind of counterintuitive, but that frugality, that's like a cornerstone to their success.
Okay. So
It's not about deprivation. It's about,
right.
making choices
Yeah.
that make sense and,
Yeah.
prioritizing long-term value over just like fleeting displays of wealth.
So being smart with your money is more important than just
Absolutely.
making a ton of it.
It's all about that net worth,
Okay.
Assets minus liabilities.
Gotcha.
That's the real measure.
Okay.
And they use this great comparison in the book.
Okay.
So you've got Charles Bobbins. He's a fireman, and his net worth is $460,000.
Okay.
But then you have John Ashton. He's a doctor, and his net worth is $1.1 million.
Wait, so the fireman is wealthier than the doctor?
Well, not in like absolute terms,
Right.
but in terms of what the book calls relative wealth.
Okay.
It's all about how your wealth stacks up against others in your income bracket and your age group. So Charles the fireman, he's way ahead of the curve
Wow.
for someone with his income and age.
Yeah.
But John the doctor,
Yeah.
he's actually lagging behind.
Even though he makes more.
Exactly.
So it really changes how we think about wealth.
Yeah.
I mean, we always assume high income equals wealthy.
Right, right. It's not just about the
Oh,
income.
but there's more to it.
It's about what you keep.
Right.
It's about that sustainable wealth.
Okay.
How long you could keep your lifestyle going without working.
That's a good point.
Charles with his savings and investments.
Yeah.
He's probably in a better spot than John.
Even though John's a doctor.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And then there's this whole thing about ancestry and wealth.
Oh, yeah. That was
Like,
fascinating.
I was blown away to find out that the English ancestry group, they don't actually have the highest concentration of millionaires.
You'd think they would.
I know, right? It's the Scottish.
The Scottish? Wow.
And get this, over 60% of those Scottish millionaires have household incomes under $100,000.
That is interesting.
Mm.
It really makes you think about those cultural factors.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something about frugality,
Yeah.
long-term thinking,
Right.
smart habits passed down.
It's like a built-in blueprint
Yeah, like a cultural blueprint for financial success.
for success.
Almost.
Wow. Okay, so we got to talk about frugality because the book really hammers that home.
It's like the bedrock
Yeah.
of wealth accumulation.
Right.
And it's so different from that image
Yeah.
the media portrays
Yeah.
of like lavish spending and all that.
Right. Right.
They talk about this guy, Johnny Lucas. He's a self-made millionaire,
Okay.
super modest lifestyle.
Okay.
He even questions like,
Yeah.
why would anyone buy a $60,000 watch
Right.
when a $100 one tells time just fine?
But isn't there a balance?
Sure.
Like, I love a good deal, but
Yeah.
what about enjoying life? you know?
That's a great point. It's not about deprivation.
Right.
It's about mindful spending,
So,
aligning your spending with your values.
okay, so are we talking like extreme couponing here?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
It's about making smart choices.
Right.
They found that over half these millionaires,
Yeah.
they never spent more than $399 on a suit.
Really?
Yeah, they're not buying into those status symbols.
Wow.
I know it's surprising,
yeah.
right? But remember,
Yeah.
most of these millionaires are first generation.
Right.
They built their wealth through hard work and discipline.
Gotcha.
They're not interested in wasting money.
Yeah. And the book also talks about how important a frugal spouse is.
Oh, yeah, huge factor.
Like almost 95% of millionaire households are married couples.
Wow.
And in most cases, the husband's the primary earner.
Okay.
But they even have this story about a millionaire's wife
Yeah,
who meticulously cuts coupons, even though her husband makes a great living.
that's dedication.
It is, right?
Yeah, it really highlights
Yeah.
that financial success in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It's a team effort.
Right.
High income, that's your great offense.
Okay.
But a frugal spouse, that's your great defense.
So it's like a power couple.
Absolutely. They're protecting their wealth together.
Working as a team.
Exactly.
I like it. And then on the other side of the coin, we've got the UAWs.
The under-accumulators of wealth.
Yeah, and to illustrate that, they talk about Theodore Teddy Friend.
Right.
Great job, but struggles to build wealth because of his spending.
It's a classic cautionary tale.
It is.
Even a high income can be eroded
Yeah.
if you don't manage it right.
And the book suggests that these habits,
Yeah.
they often come from how you were raised.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
maybe a lack of financial literacy passed down.
That's a big factor.
Yeah, like they point out that Teddy's parents spent more on cigarettes with their lifetime than they did on their house.
That puts it in perspective.
It does, right?
Yeah, small expenses can really add up.
It's like death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly. It's all about awareness.
So we've got the PAWs on one side
The prodigious accumulators.
and the UAWs on the other.
Right.
How do they approach time and planning differently?
Well, PAWs, they were all about the long game.
Okay.
They're disciplined, creating budgets, setting goals.
Steady and consistent.
Exactly. And they review their investments regularly.
Okay.
UAWs,
Yeah.
they're more reactive, sporadic with their planning.
So the PAWs are like the tortoise,
Yes.
and the UAWs are the hare.
Exactly. And the book talks about how PAWs tend to experience less fear
Real.
about their finances.
Why is that?
Well, they have that solid foundation,
Right.
that sense of control.
Okay.
UAWs, on the other hand, they're more anxious
I can see that.
about job security and keeping up their lifestyle.
It makes sense, that having that financial cushion
Absolutely.
would bring peace of mind.
Yeah. It's not just about the money.
Yeah.
It's about the security,
Right.
the freedom that it provides.
Right. Okay, so how does that difference in mindset play out when it comes to investing?
PAWs, they're patient,
Okay.
they're disciplined, they take a long-term approach.
Okay.
They're not swayed by those get-rich-quick schemes.
But doesn't that mean they miss out on those big returns?
Well, higher risks can mean higher returns.
Right.
But they also mean a higher chance of losing.
That's true.
PAWs,
Yeah.
they're all about preserving their capital
Okay.
and consistent growth over time.
They're playing the long game.
Exactly.
No.
They're looking for those solid, well-managed companies
Gotcha.
that will generate those reliable returns over time.
So they're not day trading or anything.
No, they're in it for the long haul.
Makes sense. So how do they go about choosing their financial advisors then?
They're very discerning.
Okay.
They're not swayed by sales pitches.
Right.
They rely on referrals
Okay.
from trusted sources,
So they're building a network.
exactly like their accountants, attorneys, other successful investors.
So it's about trust.
Absolutely. And once they find an advisor,
Yeah.
they don't just blindly trust them.
They stay involved.
Oh, yeah. They're actively involved in managing their finances.
That's smart.
They ask questions. They demand transparency.
They're taking control.
Exactly. It's their money and their future.
Okay, so let's circle back to that idea of intergenerational wealth transfer.
Yeah.
We talked about the potential downsides of economic outpatient care.
Right.
But the book also looks at the bigger picture.
Yeah. There are broader challenges
Yeah.
when it comes to passing down wealth.
Like what?
Well, it challenges the idea that just giving your kids money will guarantee their success.
You'd think it would, right?
It seems logical,
Yeah.
but it can actually backfire.
Okay.
They introduce this concept of weakening the weak.
Interesting.
It suggests that affluent parents,
Yeah.
they often end up supporting their least productive kids.
So it's like rewarding the ones who struggle.
Yeah, and it can create a cycle of dependence.
Right.
Those kids might lack the drive to succeed.
Because they have that safety net.
Exactly.
So what's the alternative?
It's about teaching your kids the value of hard work,
Okay.
financial responsibility, independence.
Empower them, not enable them.
Exactly. Give them the tools to build their own wealth.
Not just hand it over.
Right. And one of the more surprising recommendations,
yeah.
don't reveal your wealth to your kids.
Really?
Yeah, it avoids that sense of entitlement.
Okay.
It encourages them to be driven by their own aspirations.
They have to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, they're learning to fish.
That's a good analogy.
And the book gives some great examples
Okay.
of how to put this into practice.
Yeah.
Setting clear expectations, teaching discipline from a young age.
So it's about building those good habits early on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And fostering a culture of responsibility around money.
It's like creating a family culture.
Yeah. A culture of financial responsibility.
Right. And they also talk about those King's rules.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
Yeah, can you explain those a bit?
They're all about character resilience,
Oh.
personal responsibility.
It's more than just money management.
It is. It's about those core values.
Yeah.
Hard work, perseverance,
Yeah.
making a positive contribution.
It's about raising good humans.
Exactly. Well-rounded individuals.
Okay, so the book also dives into how to target the affluent market from a business perspective.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other angle.
It is, but it's fascinating.
It is. It highlights industries with huge potential.
Okay.
Estate planning, wealth management, intergenerational wealth transfer.
So services for wealthy families.
Exactly. And as more people build wealth,
Yeah.
the demand for these services is going to keep growing.
It makes sense as things get more complex. You
Oh.
need experts to help you navigate it all.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just financial services.
Okay.
Luxury travel, high-end real estate, specialized education.
So it's about understanding what the affluent want.
Exactly. Their priorities.
Yeah.
And offering products and services that match.
It's about understanding their mindset.
Absolutely catering to their desires.
So understanding wealth can open doors professionally too.
Definitely. It's a whole new perspective.
I like that.
That's exciting.
It is. And that wraps up part 1 of our deep dive into The Millionaire Next Door.
Wow, that was a lot of information.
It was, right?
But so insightful.
It is.
I can't wait to see what we uncover in part 2.
Me too. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everyone. You know, in the last part when we were talking about the PAWs and the UAWs,
Yeah.
one thing that really stuck with me was that whole idea of fear
Fear.
and how it affects their financial decisions.
Right.
Like, you'd think having millions in the bank would
Smart.
make you less fearful.
Right?
You would think so.
But the book says that's not always true.
It's surprising, isn't it?
It is.
UAWs, they tend to have more fear and anxiety about money.
But they're the ones making all the money.
It's not about how much you make.
Right.
It's about how you manage it.
So it's their spending habits.
Yeah, they often live above their means.
They're relying on credit.
Credit, debt, all of that.
So any little hiccup could throw them off.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like building a house on sand.
Oh, I like that.
It looks good, but it's not stable.
Not stable at all.
PAWs, on the other hand,
Yeah.
they've built their wealth on a solid foundation.
But frugality?
Frugality, saving, investment.
They have that cushion
That cushion.
to absorb the shocks.
They're prepared for those rainy days.
It's that peace of mind, isn't it?
It is. It's about security and stability.
So how does that affect how they invest?
Well, PAWs, they're patient.
Okay.
Disciplined, they think long term.
Long term.
They're not chasing those get-rich-quick schemes.
But what about those big opportunities?
Well, sure, higher risk can mean higher reward,
Right.
but also a higher chance of losing it all.
That's true.
PAWs, they focus on preserving what they have
Okay.
and growing it steadily over time.
Slow and steady wins the race.
That's their motto. They're like value investors,
Okay.
looking for those solid companies
Yeah.
with a good track record.
They're doing their research.
Oh, yeah, they're not jumping on the latest trend. So it's about a consistent approach.
Consistency, that's the key.
Okay, so how do they choose their financial advisors?
They're very careful about that.
Okay,
They don't fall for the fancy sales pitches.
right.
They get referrals from
Ex-
people they trust.
So their network is important.
It's crucial.
Yeah.
They trust their accountants, their lawyers,
Other successful people.
people who've been there.
So it's all about trust.
Trust and experience. And once they find an advisor,
Yeah.
they don't just check
Get
out
to
it.
be involved.
Oh, yeah. They're actively involved in managing their money.
That's smart.
They ask questions. They want to understand everything.
So they're not just handing over their money blindly.
Absolutely not. It's their future.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about that wealth transfer again.
Yeah.
Passing it down to the next generation.
It's a tricky one.
It is, right.
We talked about the downsides of giving too much.
The economic outpatient care.
Right. But there's more to it than that.
Okay.
The book challenges the idea that just giving money to your kids.
Will make them successful.
You think so?
It seems logical,
Yeah.
but it can actually make them weaker.
Weaker.
They call it weakening the weak.
Interesting.
Affluent parents, they often end up supporting the kids who struggle the most.
So they're almost incentivizing them not to succeed.
It can happen. Yeah, it creates a cycle of dependence.
So what's the solution?
Teach them the value of hard work,
Okay.
responsibility, independence.
Give them the tools.
Exactly, not just the money.
Don't just hand them a blank check.
And here's a surprising one.
What's that?
Don't tell them about your wealth.
Really?
It prevents entitlement.
They have to earn it.
They have to find their own way.
They learn to fish for themselves.
That's the idea, and the book gives some great advice
Okay.
on how to do that.
Yeah.
Setting expectations, teaching them about money from a young age.
It's about those early lessons,
Absolutely create a culture of responsibility.
like a family value.
Exactly.
And what about those king's rules?
Oh, those are fantastic. Yeah, I want to hear more about those.
They're all about character.
Okay.
Resilience, being a good person.
So it's bigger than just finances.
Much bigger. It's about the whole person.
It's about raising good humans.
Exactly. Well-rounded individuals.
And the book also talks about leading by example.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't just talk the talk.
You have to walk the walk.
Kids are watching.
They see everything, so you have to be a good role model.
You have to practice what you preach.
Exactly. Be open with them about your decisions.
Explain your thinking.
Yeah, involve them in the process.
So it's a family affair.
It is. It's about working together.
Okay, so the book also gives some advice on avoiding the pitfalls of wealth.
Yeah.
Like entitlement and lack of motivation.
Right. It's about setting boundaries.
Oh.
Encouraging them to find their passion.
Supporting your dreams.
Exactly. And teaching them to be grateful.
Okay, so it's about balance.
Balance is key. Supporting them without spoiling them.
Now let's switch gears a bit. The book also talks about targeting the affluent market.
Oh, yeah, from a business perspective.
It's a different angle.
It is, but it's fascinating.
It is. It talks about specific industries that cater to wealthy families.
Estate planning, wealth management, philanthropy.
So as wealth grows,
Yeah,
the demand for these services grows too.
well, it's a growing market.
And it makes sense, you know?
People need help managing their money.
Especially as they get wealthier.
Exactly. And it's not just about finances.
Okay.
There's luxury travel, high-end real estate,
Okay.
specialized education.
So it's about understanding their lifestyle.
Yeah, knowing what they want.
And providing it.
That's the key, understanding the affluent mindset.
It can open up opportunities.
Absolutely. A whole new world.
I like that.
It's exciting.
It is. And that brings us to the end of part 2.
Wow, time flies when you're talking about millionaires. I can't wait to dig into the last part.
Me too. We'll be back soon with more from the Millionaire Next Door. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the Millionaire Next Door. We've talked about their habits, their mindsets, even how they raise their kids.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has, and now I'm really curious about what kind of businesses and jobs these millionaires actually have.
Yeah, let's dive into that entrepreneurial world.
Yeah, spill the secrets.
Well, the book makes it clear there's no magic formula.
No get-rich-quick scheme.
No, not really. It's not about picking the right industry. It's more about that entrepreneurial spirit.
Right, that mindset.
Exactly. And their research showed that most millionaires are business owners.
Okay, that makes sense.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Most business owners aren't millionaires.
So it's not just about starting any business.
Exactly. You need that millionaire mindset we've been talking about.
Right, the frugality, the discipline.
All of that. So the book looked at IRS data
Okay.
to see which industries had the most profitable businesses.
Okay, I'm ready for the big reveal.
You ready for some surprises?
Okay.
At the top of the list, we've got scrap metal dealing.
Scrap metal?
Yeah, paving, contracting, mobile home dealing.
Not exactly what I was expecting.
No, right.
So it's not always about those flashy industries.
Not at all. Sometimes the best opportunities are hidden in plain sight.
Okay, so what did those businesses have in common then?
Well, they often involve specialized knowledge,
Okay.
a willingness to work hard, and a focus on a niche market.
So it's about finding those gaps that others might miss.
Exactly. And the book also points out that many millionaires,
Yeah.
they build businesses based on their existing skills.
So they're leveraging what they already know.
Exactly. They're turning their expertise into a profitable venture.
Okay. I like that it's about playing to your strengths.
They give a great example in the book.
Okay.
This guy, Larry, he worked in the printing industry,
Okay.
but he couldn't afford to start his own printing company.
Right.
So instead,
Yeah.
he became a broker of printing services.
So he connected clients with printing companies.
Exactly. And earned a commission.
That's smart. He used his knowledge to create a business.
Exactly. It's all about being resourceful.
Now, the book also talks about professionals like doctors and lawyers.
Right. But even in those fields,
Yeah.
the self-employed ones tend to be wealthier.
So it's about being your own boss.
It gives you more control, more flexibility.
And you can really maximize your income.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the money.
Right.
It's about the satisfaction of building something yourself.
That sense of accomplishment.
Exactly. And the freedom to create a life you love.
Okay, so what advice does the book have for aspiring entrepreneurs?
Well, it talks a lot about conquering fear.
Fear. But starting a business is scary.
It is. But the book says courage isn't about not feeling fear.
So what is it about?
It's about acting despite the fear.
Okay, so feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging those fears and moving forward.
So it's about being brave.
Exactly. And the book is full of stories
Yeah.
of millionaires who faced their fears and achieved incredible things.
Because they didn't let fear hold them back.
Exactly. They stepped outside their comfort zones.
And I love that story at the end of the book.
Oh, yeah. Mr. W and his dog.
It's such a great example of that paw mindset.
He wasn't afraid to go against the grain.
He stood up for what he believed in.
And in the end, he chose his dog's happiness over a fancy condo.
It shows that wealth isn't just about money.
Right. It's about living a life that's true to yourself.
Making choices that align with your values.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our deep dive into The Millionaire Next Door,
Yeah.
I hope our listeners remember that building wealth is a journey.
It's not about winning the lottery.
It's about those habits and mindsets,
The frugality, the discipline.
making smart choices, investing wisely,
It's about taking control of your finances
and creating a life of abundance.
on your own terms.
Exactly. And this book shows us that it's possible for anyone.
Anyone who's willing to put in the work.
And embrace those millionaire principles.
So to all our listeners out there,
Yeah.
start building your own millionaire next door mindset.
It can change your life.
It really can. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.